just remember you're not alone. You have
Yes.
you have source, you have your subconscious, and you have your guides and you have your angels, and they're always watching out for you. So if you're ever feeling down, just close your eyes for that moment and just let the first thing that comes to your mind come out. And I bet you'll be surprised on the result.
Welcome to the podcast that guides men to demystify and develop their intuition. I'm your host, Doug Beitz. Let's dig into the science and expand your horizons. My guest today, Andrew Wilson, began his spiritual journey in 2022. He began reading books by Dolores Cannon, which led him to practice the Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. Through QHHT, he learnt how our souls travel when we sleep and during a somnambulistic state. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Doug.
Pleasure. So I'm curious, it wasn't that long ago that you started on your spiritual journey. So what was your life like before that time?
Oh, well, I had a bit of childhood trauma that I hadn't dealt with, and that followed me to my adulthood. And I bounced around from jobs. I worked a lot in the oil and gas sector. I worked for the railway. I worked for garbage. I just wanted to work, and that's basically what my motivation was: is working and not like dealing with my feelings and basically having relationships, but not really having relationships. They were just kind of like not wanting to be lonely. And so I would just stay with people and get comfortable with them. And then eventually I would get bored with them. And then it was a repeat cycle. And then I met someone that I got really involved with, and we ended up getting into a 7-year relationship. And we just ended up getting comfortable once again. And it took forever for me to end that relationship. But once I finally did, I had to lose my mother in the process for that to take place. But once I lost my mother, that was when I could start the rebuild. And I learned a lot about myself and how I had a lot of unresolved issues, unresolved trauma, and I didn't deal with it. And it followed me until my adulthood. And it left a big scar on me. So when I started down the spiritual path, I was hurting a lot from the loss of my mother because my mother and I had an argument prior to her transitioning off this planet. And she basically said like she was going to leave, and I was supportive of it and everything. And then that was the last week I spoke to her. And then I got back and I was on the road coming back from work. And that's when I got the call and they told me that she was not going to make it. So I drove to the hospital and I spent 8 hours with her and I watched her basically die. And I had like five doctors telling me that she was going to die. So you want to talk about like a whirlwind of emotions. And I resented my ex-girlfriend a lot for that because her and my mother didn't see eye to eye. And I blamed my ex for not, not allowing me to see my mother. So that took a big toll. And then it was finally when I chose to end the relationship, that was when I started down the spiritual path. I went to a lady who's now considered a friend of mine, and she had this machine that measures your frequency. And my body was telling me that I needed to change a lot of things. So I started doing that. And then that's when she said, if you really want to read a good author, read Dolores Cannon. So that's when I started to read Dolores Cannon, and Dolores's knowledge just kind of saved me. It took away all the fear aspect of life, and it showed me that I'm not scared to die. I'm not scared to basically have anything happen to me, because if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, because we're all here for a reason. We're all here for either serve humanity or we're paying back our karma for our contract. And once my karma's paid up, then my contract's done. And that could be today, it could be tomorrow, who knows? But either way, I don't allow it to fear it. But then at the same aspect, I got so involved and engulfed in her work that I decided to take it upon myself to learn this type of training. And once I learned this type of training and I started seeing like the results in my sessions with my clients and how well it was healing them, it was tremendous, and I couldn't ask for like a greater gift in my life than that. And the fact of the matter is that I'm going to continue to do that. And then I also run a podcast myself. And with my podcast, I talk to so many people that do healing. And there's so many forms of healing, which is what I love. You can do any form of healing and you can still get the same result. It doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, we're all here to help humanity. We're all here to serve humanity. And that's my end goal, is to serve humanity and help as many people as I can in the process.
Mm, interesting. So I'm just curious, you mentioned that lady that had the machine and hooked you up and she suggested some changes. I'm curious, so those changes were obviously to help improve your life. What, and just generalizing, not don't have to be too specific for you, but what in general, what sort of things was she suggesting?
Just to like open my eyes and see it from a different perspective, and not like I was going down the rabbit hole and I was getting into the whole fear-based reality of everything and like the end of the world and all this nonsense. And she was basically just kind of gave me the hard truths about it. Just start reading the books and just start understanding life and the purpose of life and the path that we're all on and how we are connected energetically. And none of us realize it because we're so caught up in our own other people's realities. We don't focus on our own realities. And that was what I started to do. I started to focus on my own reality. And once I took myself out of someone else's reality and I started opening myself more spiritually, a lot of wonderful things started happening. Synchronicities, relationships. I have a wonderful fiance now who I love very much, and she's my soulmate. I'm pretty sure we were in past lives together. And that's the greatest thing, because I've never been committed to anything in my entire life. I was not committed to school. I was not committed to work. I wasn't committed to anything but going down the spiritual path. I'm committed to the QHHT. I'm committed to my fiance. I'm committed to helping my clients. I'm committed to working with my guests on my podcast. I'm just committed to this because this is serving a purpose. This is serving humanity. And that's what we're all here for in the end, right?
Yeah. So it was it the event of your mother passing that really like threw you the curveball to like move you into the spiritual realm, or was it pretty much around that time?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was around that time because I was working for a very like it's like a corporate company where you weren't considered a person, you were considered a number. And I asked two of my colleagues at work why they wouldn't get a certain vaccine. And they said it goes against my human rights. And that's when it dawned on me that I have control of what I think and I have control of what goes in my body. So that was when I started going down the rabbit hole. And that was when I came across this lady, and then she just introduced me to Dolores, and I took it off from there. And I just kept reading Dolores's books, and I kept studying meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, just to like enhance my spirituality even more, because it was neat too. Because at one point, I was so tapped with my meditation that I was able to see my mother and I was able to hear those words, I am proud of you. And that was the greatest moment of my life, to feel that, to understand that she is proud of me, she forgives me. Then that was part of my growth. That was how I started to grow. And after that, I just kept going and going. Like every day I'm growing. Like we all still have our battles and we all still have, our moments of like our ego getting in the way. But at the most part, like I'm growing spiritually, and I'm learned that I'm a soul having a human experience, not a human having a soul experience.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. Yeah, now that's very interesting conversation to have with someone of your age. And I think when we talked a week or so ago, we worked out I think you're about 6 months older than my oldest son, so I'm just old enough to be your dad. And there's not a lot of, I mean, my sons I can have conversations like this with, but there's not a lot of other young, what I consider young for me, men who, we can start to have these conversations with. So it's great. Um, So the QHHT training you did, was that in person or on?
It was online. They at the first level, it was taught by Dolores online before she transitioned, and then the second level was taught by her daughter Julia Cannon.
Yeah. And so were you like on a Zoom call like this or live, or were you just like watching videos?
No, it was mainly just videos, and then you do like a Q&A with the Laura or Julia, and I think the other fella's name is Kaya Wittenberg, and then they just kind of go over like your work and your practicum, and then you write an exam at the end of it, and then once you're done your exam, then you have your level one, and then you have to get 25 successful sessions before you're a level two.
Right. Because I guess I was getting at there was whether you were interacting with other students or not. And I was curious whether there were any other men doing the course, because my sort of knowledge of these sort of things is typically female. The word dominated is not correct, but it's just there's a lot more females doing it. Have you found that at all?
Yes, there's quite a few men doing the program. Actually, there's actually one gentleman that's out of Australia that's doing it. I'm not
Okay.
sure what part of Australia, but he is there. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, yeah. Because and for me, I'm constantly trying to motivate men to start to look out of the box and look for um, not to have such an event as you did with your mother passing, to start to, give you a slap over the head to sort of start to realize, it's potentially before these things sort of happen. We're trying to motivate people, and some realms I find there was a guy I interviewed a couple of months ago, and he's for 30 years he's had his own gym teaching jujitsu and all, but he teaches qigong and all sorts of stuff, and teaches meditation in the gym as well. And about 50% of his clientele are male, which is and I think it's the jujitsu and that sort of thing that gets them in there, and then and he teaches them, while they're doing qigong, etc., to meditate through the whole physical activity, not just sitting down with your eyes closed, but sort of moving meditations as well. But yeah, cool, cool, cool. Let's see what else we got here. So I'm just curious because the podcast's about intuition. During your QHHT sessions, like, is intuition a thing that seems to come through or not?
Absolutely. See, whenever my client goes into the somnambulistic state, their subconscious, they connect with their subconscious, and their subconscious basically I facilitate the session and the subconscious does the healing. And during the session, there is intuitive thoughts that come to my mind as well. Like there's nothing but energy. It's a very exhausting process because you're both in line with your energies and you're both feeding off each other's energies. So that it's nothing but intuitive if you really want to know the truth on
Yeah.
both sides.
Okay. Now I'm curious. In your bio, you use the word somnambulistic, and I'm thinking, oh, you know what that is. And then I thought, just going to look it up. And when I looked it up to get, a dictionary definition of it, it partly in there it talks about sleepwalking and movement and the sleep state and that sort of thing as well. And I'm like, oh, now I don't sleepwalk. That No, I don't, because my wife would have definitely told me. But I do crazy stuff when I'm sleeping sometimes, like I kick and jump and yell and scream. Once I fully leapt completely out of the bed, lucky it was towards the floor and not towards my wife's side. Um, and I mean, then I'll go for a week where she's my wife's a light sleeper, so she lets me know what I've been up to. And so it's sort of half described this somnambulistic state as potentially you're not just laying there in rest. So I'm curious, like he talks about like where our soul goes or what had happened. So what's going on there? Like when you get people into these hypnosis states or somnambulistic state or whatever, what is going on with us? Where do we go? What do we do? What's the process there?
It all depends on the subconscious and what the subconscious wants you to see. Some people, they'll have like a past life regression where they'll go to a time of Egypt. Another client I had went all the way back to war in Vietnam. And then another client I had went to another planet and was having a time continuum moment. It all depends on what type of healing you need because a lot of our like illnesses and disease, not actual diseases, but what we bring from our past lives will follow us to this life. And some people like for instance, asthma. Asthma is actually because in your past life you were strangled, you drowned, or you hung.
Okay. And then that manifests as asthma in this lifetime.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So things that have affected us back then. And so now it's QHHT, Quantum Hypnosis Healing Technique.
Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique.
Quantum Healing Hypnosis.
Yes.
So basically saying we take you into this hypnosis state and with the goal of healing things. And typically we think of healing as physical, but it could obviously be emotional or whatever, which then may manifest physically in our bodies. Does that sound right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So the goal of someone having a session with you or another practitioner in the world somewhere is to, I guess, improve their life, to gain insight to what they're going through physically or emotionally or that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Cool. Because I mean, I've certainly heard of Dolores, and I've listened to probably at least a dozen of her books. And so I'm familiar with things, but I'm just, for some people listening may not have heard of Dolores. And it's easy, like when I'm describing Dolores to my wife or my sons, I'm saying she's just like Gran, which was their grandmother who passed, my son's great grandmother, my wife's grandmother. She just reminds me so much. She was, I think I think Dolores was 84 when she passed. My wife's grandmother was 94 when she passed. And they're like, really? Like someone like Gran is like super spiritual doing hypnosis? Yeah, she just looks like that. It's just, she's not this out there weird looking woman. She's just this real basic grandmother type look. So, yeah. So have you yourself ever actually been a client through like, have you gone through at the other end rather than being the practitioner? Have you experienced a session that way?
Absolutely. Well, I figured out I wanted to try it. So yeah, I went for a session and it was an interesting experience. I had a lot of my trauma from my past life followed me to this life. This is why I had so much childhood trauma and why I picked the parents I picked and why I had the struggles I had during life.
So you found it reasonably helpful then?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a learning. Like the best thing is knowledge. Knowledge is power. The
Mm,
more knowledge you gain, the more power you have. The more power you have, the more you can attract. You can make beautiful, creative ideas to help people. And that's the thing, that's what we're all here for is to help people. But we're so caught up in the rat race of going to school, getting a job, and following in someone else's footsteps when in all fairness, we should be following in our own footsteps and we should be making our own goals, making our own dreams and rebuilding this planet, not destroying it.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm with you there, I can tell you. So you talked about, I did hear you use the word synchronicities earlier. Are you, and was it just in a form, because intuition's one of my favorite things, and synchronicities would come up like a very close second there behind it. So when you started to wander down the spiritual path, is that when you sort of meant that synchronicities started to occur? Or?
Yeah, so it's like I learned from a guest on my show. Her name is Carrie Logan, and she has this chart. It's like 3D, 4D, 5D. And as soon as you start ascending out of 3D and you start getting into 4D, your synchronicities start to increase. And once you get to 5D, then there's nothing but synchronicities. Yes, they're a form of illusion, but they're guiding you on a certain path to where you need to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I found through the years that I just have specific things I see and do. And look, I know synchronicities happened in my life 30 or 40 years ago, but they just, you wouldn't remember, but life was a lot slower back then. Um, and I might, over a period of a month, I might, there might be a synchronicity occur 3 times. You know, it would take a month, like, and it's like, oh, that's unusual. That sort of same thing happened 2 weeks ago. And then, like maybe 2 weeks later, something will happen again. Whereas now, it's rare that I've got to see something 3 times to wake me up. Usually on the second time for sure. And often now I can recognize things the first time. I'm like, oh, okay, that's a synchronistic moment. My guides or whoever, whatever, they have I guess showed me things in a similar way often enough that I'm starting to recognize things more and more. And I won't share specific examples because it's not about the interview is not about me, but I have had, I mean, why there's such a favorite thing for me. I've had such phenomenal like things occur in my life when I've followed the synchronicities. It's just like, oh my goodness, this is like things that have been ridiculously helpful and so life-changing for the better for myself and for my family. It's just like, oh man, and that's another reason why I've got this show going, is to educate men on why they should follow these inner guiding feelings, their intuition, because it just makes your life so much better. I mean, my life's not perfect. I still have doubts and fears and all sorts of things constant, like everyone else does. But I have so much more confidence in so many other areas by following these things, these little breadcrumb trails as they occur. It's almost like I know that my guides are there just feeding it and just saying, let's just see. He picked up on this one the last 3 times when we use it. Just see if he gets it again. Bang. And they drop the little breadcrumb over on the other side over here. And I follow it that way. And then, oh, wow, something crazy, amazing. And it's not always amazing. Sometimes it's just nice and comforting. And it's just a nice thing. But I've had some absolutely incredible life-changing experiences that have been really enjoyable for me and my family, but they were massive leaps of faith as well, like massive. Like we had people just there was a couple of things happen where we had to keep it secret. We couldn't tell people what we were going to do because we would have had so many naysayers, so many people just trying to steal the dream. And it wasn't even like an amazing idea we came up with. It was synchronicities led us to it. And it's like, yeah, this is so out there. This is like weird stuff. This is like people are going to think we are nuts. And if we fail, we're going to look really stupid, really stupid. But we followed it, went on, and it's a huge amount of work and put in a huge amount of effort, and the reward was just mind-boggling, just through following synchronicities. Recognizing them was one thing, but following them is another thing. It's so yeah, no, they're a very enjoyable part of my life, I can tell you. Now, from what you've been talking about there, I'm just curious, do you feel that you chose to be on the planet at this time for any particular reason?
That's a very good question. I'm still like trying to figure that out myself, but I believe, yeah, I believe I was put here for a reason. I believe we're all put here for a reason, right? And there's some of us that aren't put here at all. They're just uh, AI or a form of an entity that is not like trying to serve a purpose. They're trying to keep us in fear, dumb us down, and keep our intelligence and like slow. And but there's others like yourself and I that, yeah, there's tons of us around here, and we're here for a purpose to serve humanity. Because so humanity is so hell bent on fear right now, and that's my motto: is fear is our strongest opponent. And because fear is our strongest opponent, is because it's shoved down our throat day in and day out. This war, this pandemic, that pandemic, this hurricane, that hurricane, this fire, that fire. The news, it just fuels fear. And then you got drugs that are introduced to the system, the drugs that are brought into the system because the system was designed for the drugs to be there. So it keeps us all fear, it keeps us all locked in cages, mental cages, when we don't realize that we're so asleep. And I've been on both sides, so I know I was fully asleep and I didn't understand spirituality. I thought it was people were nuts. I thought that you were crazy. And then when I got on the other side and I realized that these people are most brilliant people in the world, why aren't we helping them? Why aren't we joining them? Because we're brainwashed. We're brainwashed on all these ideas. And it's social media. You got everything that's just taking you, distracting you. And then you've got stories that are twisted and turned, and it's constant, but it's games. It's games the universe plays with us. And it's tests. I mean, before, like, I would get upset over the smallest thing. Now, the biggest thing doesn't even upset me anymore because why? It's just another form of test. It's like playing a video game. Once you level up, you got to keep going, right? Till you get to the final boss. Well, the final boss is you're done. You're finished on this planet. It's time to move on to something else. It's time to, like, Source tells you to come home.
Yeah. Yeah, I often do look at life like a video game, and and people think, oh, that's just silly to do that, but it gives me a degree of comfort, realizing that it is like a game, and there's different levels. And when you sit back and watch history, for the people who don't study history, don't would see less. But when you study history, you can see cycles and things. So it's almost like you're on a race car track and you're doing a lap and you finish and you win the race or you come third or whatever. And then it's like, do you want to race again? Yeah. Select a different track. But the track's 85% the same. Like there's only so many versions of the race. They alter the layout of the track a little, but a lot of it's the same. And history repeats. And you can start to see the cycles of life and how things go. And sometimes things repeat over thousands of years or hundreds of years or a decade. But in recent history, some things are repeating every couple of years. It's like, man, they're getting desperate. They just keep running the same track around and around and around with the different, they've changed the landscape. They've bulldozed all the old trees down and planted different types of trees so it looks different. But you travel a couple of 100 feet and you have a hard left, and then you go another 30 feet and you have a hard right, and it's like that's what we had last time. But they've just changed the scenery on the sides and the track. Oh, and when we go along here, where there's a big mud hole. Yep, yep. But last time I remember, if I stayed hard to the right, I went around the mud hole and I was quicker, faster. And it's like the mud hole's in the same spot. But it's a different color mud. It's red this time instead of orange. And I'll hang hard to the right and I'll go around. That's just like last time. And it's a cycle. It's just, and it's like you say, when we're able to step back and look at the bigger picture of everything. And to me, that like you said, when you were fully asleep, you couldn't see that. But as you start to awaken and the blinkers start to come off and you start to realize this is a very similar racetrack they put us on this time again. And I already know most of the problems and where to dodge and which line to take. And many years ago, when I was a teenager, I used to race motorbikes. And the line you took into each corner and out of each corner was pretty important on, setting yourself up for the next corner, whether you were going to be coming first or last, in the race, or people were going to, you took the wrong line, people were going to overtake you and spray dirt in your face if you'd learnt where to go and to make it easier and simpler. And life's very, very much like that. And you're talking there before about fear. I'll turn that question back onto you politely, not to put you on the spot, but this is an on the spot question. What's your biggest fear?
That's a tough question. You see, I don't really, my biggest fear, I guess, would be, that's a hard one. I don't know really, because I've learned to allow myself not to fear anything anymore. But my biggest fear before that was the fear of failure, because I was told my entire life that I wasn't going to amount to anything. I had door after door slam in my face, telling me to quit, telling me to give up, telling me I was useless, telling me I was retarded, I was special intellectually, and I was not smart enough to get this career or that career. So it's a failure was a big fear for me, but now there's nothing really that I'm scared of, because I know it's not real. I know that this is all an illusion that's put before our eyes, and it's dawning to when you start to, like, you step back, and like the pandemic was a prime example of when you step back and you look and you see things that don't make sense, and then you start to see it more and more, and the fear kind of just alleviates from you, because it's like, okay, this person said that this week and now they're saying something totally different this week. There's something not right with that. And then you start questioning it, and then it takes away the fear, because then you're like, okay, is this really believable? And then just to realize that, like, everything that's going on in the world is genetically connected, and we're the ones that are causing it. So I don't really have a fear for myself, but I fear for people that don't want to wake up and realize that we're shifting, and we're going to continue to shift, and your vibration is going to raise, and you're going to have a lot of interesting things happen to you, and you don't know how to deal with it. And that's my only fear, is a lot of people that might self-sabotage and try to end what suffering they have. But the suffering is a reason you're having this suffering. So you wake up, you realize that you are a spiritual being, you realize you are energy, and you're immortal. Like you're saying, history repeats itself. Of course, history repeats itself, because we were back in history. We are ancient. One of my clients is like, that had I asked how old they were, and they're 14 million years old. You think about it, how many lifetimes we've lived, how much history repeats itself. Of course it does, because we were a part of history. Every single one of us on this earth is a part of history. That's an ongoing cycle until we get it right, until we get perfection. Jesus Christ had to live so many lives before he figured it out. But that's how you do. That's what the whole idea is here. This is a school. We're here to learn. Once we learn the meaning of being a spiritual being, of having a soul experience in a human body, then our contract's completely finished.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. That's good. So I'm curious, I will have your contact details and that sort of stuff for people to find you. So your QHHT sessions, you do in person only?
Yes, you can only do it in person, because if the client has an episode where they're in a death scene, you want to be there so you can de-escalate the death scene, because you don't want anyone to experience a death scene, because it is very traumatic and very scary.
Mm-hmm. And so what part of the country are you in?
I'm in Canada.
Okay. And what city?
Well, the city's called Warrenville. It's a very small city. It's just north of Edmonton, about 40 minutes.
Okay. All right. So we'll have your contact details in the show notes if anyone wanted to connect or anything with you. Is there
Totally.
anything that we haven't covered that you would really like to talk about?
No, you've been pretty straightforward. I mean, we pretty much covered everything that I wanted to say. I mean, I was just thankful to be a part of this, and I'm grateful to have the experience of being a guest because I'm usually a host and I'm usually the one interviewing guests. So this is kind of nice to be a guest and not a host.
Yeah, that's good. And yeah, I'm always on the lookout for men who are, you know, started to recognize that intuition, synchronicities, things like that in their life are a thing that we need to, are helpful, things we need to develop and that sort of stuff. And just always trying to get the message out to other men to help them make just one better decision a day by using their intuition. And, like if they want to make half a dozen better decisions, that's fine. But just one better decision a day, every day, over time would make a phenomenal improvement and change in our lives. And not just the men who go down that path, but everyone who they come into contact with. So, yeah. So, Andrew, thank you for your time. It's great. And I'm sure like every podcast I do is quite different. And this one's, it's different to any other I've done. And I think it's great for the men out there to hear of all the other men on the planet who have gone through shit in their lives, gone through things that aren't enjoyable, but are now taking the blinkers off, seeing a different way that is more helpful, better. And yeah, thanks for sharing what you've shared today, because I know it's helpful for a lot of men out there.
Totally. I'm glad to be here, and I'm so happy for you doing what you're doing too and helping serve humanity. And much love to each and one of you listening to Doug's show. And just remember, you're not alone. You have you have source, you have your subconscious, and you have your guides and you have your angels, and they're always watching out for you. So if you're ever feeling down, just close your eyes for that moment and just let the first thing that comes to your mind come out. And I bet you'll be surprised on the result.
Excellent. Thanks, Andrew.
You're welcome.
Bye, mate.
Bye.
Well, we're at the end of another thought-provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever-reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition. It will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.